and we'll see where we go to.
I can edit this.
I think student to student in the older years hasn't been hugely impacted because they've settled, they have their place in the school, they have their friend groups, they have the run of the building.
Yeah.
I think what I've definitely seen among first years is it's been harder to settle because of the masks.
Right.
Because they don't have... there's almost a hindrance to their freedom and their liberty. They're boxed off in pods for lunchtime, so they can't mix as much.
Okay.
The masks don't lend themselves to conversation, to a chat, a whisper.
Yeah.
So they've become a natural barrier, I think, to integration, in first year in particular. I think the first year tutors have tried to make an effort to kind of negate that issue, but it is definitely there, I think, more for them than for the older years.
Right, and in this inquiry that I was, one of my opinions now that you mentioned break time was inter-year relationships. So a first year getting to know a second year, for example, the heavy segregation around break times. Do you think that would have affected
I actually think
a second year not mixing with a third year ever a break time, or a third year not mixing with a fifth year? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Do you think that has had an impact?
I would love if you had the opportunity to compare what it is this year to what it was. I actually think we, for right or wrong, we do segregate years at break times anyway. And the mingling that happens is generally through the extracurricular. It's through a sporting endeavour, It's through a trip. But I think because of the size of our year groups and the size of the school community and the geography of where they have their lunches, it's more typical that they are more segregated. Obviously that's amplified this year, and you are keeping them apart, and you're even keeping them apart within their overall groups, but it's not something I would have considered being a huge issue this year.
So, but the lack of extracurricular stuff, so in terms of a sports trip to play a game, or a trip, say, for a geography excursion, or a trip to the theatre to watch a play, right, that element is gone obviously now. So by what you've said, so it's possible that has an influence on student relations, that they don't get that time to mix.
They don't get that time to mix. And a comment that's been passed in the staff room is, it has been our most intense first term in a long time.
Right.
Because there has been no break. The start of year mass, the school show, the extracurricular excursions, a teacher will have a free class here and there, a year group will be let out to watch the play. It's been class upon class upon class upon class. It's been very intense.
Okay. And
I think the kids are feeling that.
Right, yeah.
Because you're front-loading work all the time. You're filling those spaces with revision, with new work. We're ploughing through the work. And I think the time to breathe a little bit has been removed, as well as everything else, not just to socialise and to mingle. And
now that you mentioned the school show, because obviously I would have known, being from the area here out the road in Borris, that the school show on your sign is a massive part of what life in the school is about, isn't it? It's kind of a... And talk to me about how, because I know you've been involved in that side of things as well.
It's a defining characteristic of the school, hugely. It's almost a rite of passage, the notion that when you get to third year, it's your turn. And even the week that the show should have been on this year, there was a real sentiment among my own third years of, this should be us, this should be our time. And having that kind of snatched away from them, it has impacted. It's something that brings the community together. Everyone's involved. You have 250 kids on the stage, so over a third of your, just on a third of your student body is involved directly, and then more again between orchestra and fifth year student council front of house. There's a sense of ownership of the event. That permeates the whole school, the staff, the kids, the community across the way as well, the religious order. We haven't seen very much of them this year. That's an occasion where they like to be very much in touch with the school. As well as that, I think it's a chance where we are in touch with other schools. Your matinees, you bring them in. Other schools, boarding schools, send busloads of kids over to watch it. And there's a real buzz about it. It's been a huge loss this year. I think it's only when it's taken away you realise.
Yeah, I definitely, even being new to the school, felt that sense in the week that was in it, like that time of the school show was.
Yeah, the people.
You could feel it in the air. It was a gaping hole, exactly right, Jan.
You mentioned at the start about staff-student relationships this year. I think the big thing is students are feeling they don't have the same access to staff that they did.
Right.
They're not to hand. And it says a lot, I suppose, about the school that we are to hand for kids an awful lot. Extracurricular activities, stuff after class, in between class, in the corridor, lunch times, you're floating about. You interact with them on a daily basis in a very personal way here. That to a certain extent has been removed, and I would hear kids saying that.
Do you think the staff here missed that connection with the students as well this year?
Absolutely, yeah. But I mean, we're at a position where there's staff eating their lunch in their car because of the circumstances that they're in. So they may not feel like they want to put themselves in that position on a daily basis. Like on a weekly basis, I teach 240 kids thereabouts. You know, for me to spend my 40 minutes with them is enough. On top of that, normally then I would be involved in the school with kids in a whole host of different ways. And I think when those ways are removed, as I say, they don't have the same access to us as they normally would. It's a pity, it's a shame, but I would also say it's a temporary measure.
All right.
And it's for their safety and for ours.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And hopefully it is temporary, okay, so that's kind of school communities, all right. Now, moving on to, I just want to have a quick chat about teaching strategies in the classroom, okay? And there again, all the research shows that we'll call it the old way, okay, for the want of a better word, of the teacher dominating the classroom environment that's long since acknowledged that's the move away from that is a good thing to a student centred approach in the classroom where we'll call it the experiences of all the various students outside of school are all brought together in the classroom within that kind of learning environment, and not only academic learning takes place but social learning and an awareness of other people and what the circumstances they come from and their family and everything else. And in a certain way, with this kind of socially distant approach in the classroom where a single desk, single student, everybody keeping their distance and the teacher at the top, I think we're gone a little bit, and true, obviously this is unavoidable in a way, back towards a teacher-dominated learning environment in the classroom.
We are, a directional approach.
How have you found that as a teacher? Because I know from chatting to you before, you're very, very much into empowering the student as a learner themselves in the classroom in terms of groups and giving them as much autonomy as a learner as you can. So how have you found that as a teacher, say, to go back?
I have found the opportunity for that moving away from the class on a daily basis. I think we had begun to move towards a model where, yes, group work and integration and collaboration within the class was central to what we were doing in the room. But we had also begun to move a little bit towards a model where they were doing that online, they were doing that in their own ways away from the classroom because of the CBA structures.
Okay.
And I think the change towards that has been rapid because that's what's been needed. So I find myself allowing them the opportunity to work collaboratively online and digitally away from class, assigning work where they can go into their pods, their groups, digitally. Now, that's no replacement for the socialisation that should happen in group work. But again, it's a temporary measure to hopefully a temporary problem. But it is, I think, a massive issue. There are other ways. I have found my classroom becoming a much louder space this year because I am still keen for them to discuss, to talk, to be in groups, to share ideas. But because they have to do that at a socially distanced and acceptable distance from each other, I'm still allowing it to happen as much as I can. But from a distance. They're masked up, they're in their behind perspex in my particular room, given the room I'm in. So you just have to find innovative and different ways to do it. Joanne Carey here on staff has set up a little thing on a Tuesday and a Thursday. It happened last week. Teach Meet, which was fabulous, and teachers from all across different departments tipped down and shared kind of little ideas that they've come up with and things that they are doing in their socially distanced classroom to still integrate a model of learning that's progressive and innovative and challenges the students and isn't simply the chalk and talk and the take down notes. And I mean, there was wonderful ideas there. I gave a few of my own, what I've been doing in classrooms, and I heard ones from teachers that I immediately said, yes, that works, I want to do it. So
that's teacher collaboration. It's such a powerful tool.
It's such a powerful tool, but it's essential because you're not going to manage to get away with this year on your own because of the difference in what we're doing. What we're doing this year is very, very different. We're acutely aware of that, and I think it's only going to be successful if you kind of look at what other people are doing. We got a taster for it last year. I mean, they couldn't have been more distance than they were in their own homes. And we were still managing to teach them. And I was still putting them in pods to work together, and I was still getting people to feed back to me the work from the group as a whole, and I was still assigning roles within the group. And you're still modelling the notion of group work at a remove from directly in front of you. And sometimes it can be a huge success, and sometimes it can't. There are barriers to learning for certain kids.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi, access to technologies. So sometimes the notes, the old school notes and the chalk and talk and the questions at the end of the chapter, sometimes that's what you need to provide a kid with, because they don't have access to the other.
Yeah.
But it's changed the dynamic hugely. But I'm just trying to find ways around it here and there. Walking debates.
It's forced the teacher to become an innovator again in the classroom.
Absolutely.
And I suppose some teachers are always innovating, and I suppose some do get into a kind of pattern that they like to teach in. But I suppose it shoved everybody out of their comfort zone maybe in a way.
It really did. I mean, I remember last year I'm coordinator for history, and we hadn't done the CBAs at that point. We hadn't rolled them out, and suddenly it was thrown at us, right, this is what you need to be doing. Kids are at home, how are you assessing? You can't give them a traditional exam at the end of the year. And one teacher suggested, no, let's give them a traditional exam, and they have to do it with their camera turned on, and we can supervise them.
Yeah.
So they were so stuck in the way.
Yeah.
They wanted to actually supervise an exam.
Right.
And we were going, no, it's project, it's autonomous, it needs to be led by them. If you're going to get them to do some kind of an exercise, do it on Microsoft Forms, design the exam, it's self-correcting. We got to move away from what we know, because we've been, thrown into this circumstance. But together, we have the expertise, we have the knowledge, and I think a big thing is a lot of teachers are afraid to make that change. And I remember hearing somebody say one time, the change in education needs to be incremental, bit by bit by bit. We didn't have the time to be incremental in March. It was do it, sink or swim. Learn how to use Zoom, or don't teach your class.
Yeah.
And I think we all had that little bit of expertise to bring to it, and show people, look, we'll get through this. This is how we're going to get through it. But we're now bringing that to the classroom this year. And while it's a very different classroom, we've 6 months of distance learning, 4 months of distance learning done. And we have ways and means around it. And we will scaffold it in different ways this year. But as I say, it's a temporary thing. The classroom will eventually go back to what the modern classroom should be.
Grand, lovely. And just, I know the bell is gone, so just one very last one. Pupil motivation and pupil stress. Have you seen, like, let's treat them separately. So we spoke earlier on how the work is front loaded and the pupils are starting to feel it now. So
I go
has that a knock-on effect on pupil stress in general, you think?
A little bit. It's intense, and there's a lot of work being dropped on them, but they're handling quite well. Where I would identify pupil motivation and stress, and there's a crossover there, it's at the senior end of the school. They're very worried about what will happen their leaving cert. I don't think third years have even considered, like, if their junior cycle doesn't complete, if it's a teacher assigned grade, I don't think they're bothered either way at this point. And that's fine, and that's great, because you don't want them stressing. But I do have, like, we came back at the start of sixth year, we had children taking 3 and 4 hours over a piece of homework to hand you, terrified that this would inform a predicted grade for them. They came back going, if we don't do our leaving cert, you have to give me the grade like last year's class. Yeah. And that was a disaster.
Yeah.
So they're very, very worried from that point of view. As I said to them since, I said, the predicted grade debacle as it was, I said, that actually went so badly, if they had to, they will do anything to sit the exams this year.
Yeah.
They will not allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And you've got to try and affirm that with kids and make them realise that that's the situation.
Yeah.
But that, to me, among senior cycle, was the biggest stressor.
Right, okay.
This idea of how do we catch up, and what if we don't get to do our leaving cert either.
Okay.
So that has been a bit of an issue for them.
Right.
And I think the department need to put them at ease and come out and say, you will do your leaving cert. There aren't absolutely no plans.
Yeah.
And now clarity hasn't been great from that department over the last 6 months, but it does come eventually. So hopefully sooner rather than later, the word will filter that you absolutely will be doing your leaving cert this year.
Right. Grand. Lovely. Listen, we've got Boca class, so we better head off. But thanks a million, Dan.
No problem.
Appreciate
Great.
it. Okay.
Cheers.
Good job. Thanks.